Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. We are here with another episode of Deep Random Talks. Today, with myself, I have Moin, my awesome co host, as well as Colin, a very known investor in Canadian ecosystem. And we're going to talk about a lot of investment and fundraising related topics. Thanks for being with me, Colin and Moin. What's new with you, Moin? What's happening these days?
It's all good. Just having some banter with Colin on LinkedIn, going back and forth on the deep tech side of investments and what are some of the things that we can do to support the ecosystem better. But I'm very happy that Colin has joined us today to share his perspective. And I guess from my perspective, RiSC Capital is probably one of the few, or maybe only very early stage VC firms in Canada that focus in deep tech companies. That's why it's very great to have Colin with us. So Colin, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe we can start with a couple of icebreakers. Where are you located at right now? Where do you call home?
Right now, I'm in probably the worst area of the city of Toronto, just a block away from this very sketchy corner of Sherbourne and Dundas. I moved from one of the nicest areas of the city to one of the sketchiest areas of the city last summer, not knowing whether I would like it or not. But so far, I really like it down here. Like I've discovered my cool little spots and got my coffee shop and my oyster guy and stuff like that. So I really actually like it down here. I was surprised, but I read about this corner on the news occasionally when there's something going on.
What's the
What?
what's the good coffee shop there? I'm always looking for good coffee shops.
Yeah, so there's this place at Gerard and Berkeley on the corner, and I can't even pronounce the name. It's the couple is a team from Lyon, France, who have in the basement they make fresh croissants every morning and bread and everything like that, and they have their own signature raspberry croissants, and the coffee's really good, and it's just a really nice spot. It's called something Lab, Kala something Buell Lab. It's like a very long word. I don't even know what it means.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Any passion projects you're working on? Any interesting books you're reading when you go to the coffee shop?
No, not so much. I lived in Spain for a couple of years, and as a sort of entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. That's what's in my blood, right? So I've started a bunch of companies, and I kind of got to venture capital through that tunnel. And so I lived in Spain for a couple of years. So I brought back olive oil. So 10 years ago. So just for my friends, really, and that's turned into like a little business. So now I, sell olive oil to my friends in a few stores in the city. So that's kind of like that's always been like a little passion thing going on. And plus cava as well. Cava is a really nice sort of sparkling prosecco or champagne from Spain. And I like to kind of keep my connections to Spain going as any way I can, including the olive oil. So that's my little passion project for the moment.
Awesome. Do you have an e-commerce shop that you can buy from?
Any what shop?
An e-commerce shop that maybe.
E-commerce. Well, I have a website, but Blackbird Bakery sells it. They have a couple of shops in Toronto. Hobson Grace sells it. There's a couple. They have a shop or two. It's out there a little bit, but yeah, e-commerce is. It's called doscielosprivado.com. I can give you guys the link.
Sure. Awesome. Great.
I'm out right now because they don't ship, and I can't get it sent to me in the freezing cold from Spain. But I'll have a huge stock coming in April.
Great. Yeah, looking forward to that, I guess. Then, so Colin, why don't you give us maybe a high level introduction of what you do and a bit about your background, I guess.
Yeah. So venture capital. I mean, there's lots of venture capital firms. I partnered with my friend Scott Pelton 2.5 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago. We partnered to try to solve what we thought was a bit of a problem and an opportunity in the venture capital ecosystem in Canada. Canada's venture capital system is good, but it's still young, and there's not enough money in it, in my opinion. But we really noticed there was an opportunity in the deep tech early stage area. So in other words, there was a lot of interesting, tech coming out of universities that needed to be commercialized or that wanted to be commercialized. Because we have great, universities here and really smart people, and it's cold, so everyone's inside all the time doing their work instead of outside playing tennis, and we wanted to help that little area, that little niche area of helping commercialization of innovation in Canada, and so we started the first deep tech fund in Canada, and after we launched in 2020, BDC launched a deep tech fund, and Boreal in Montreal launched a deep tech fund, and people have been doing bits and pieces of deep tech, but we were the first to become entirely focused on that, and I think mainly to fill the gap, and so, but it's $10 million fund. It's quite small. But we hope, our goal is over, the next decade or two to grow the size of the deep tech capital for early stage in Canada, so we can help, get more of the innovations that are coming out of universities, into commercialization and sales. So for what we do, we get up in the morning and we, try to find deals, and in the deep tech area, it's maybe a little more challenging because it's, there are a lot of science guys, trying to kind of, they're quite focused in the lab. They've maybe been working on the tech for like 3 or 4 years. They could have some patents, or they could be still partnered with the university. They're not as easy to find because they're not necessarily out there talking about their tech to everyone. There's always, the companies that are doing deep tech, there's always more work to do in the lab. So they have to we have to find the time when, we can, help them transition to pilot projects and things like that. So, and the tech has to be at a certain level, technical readiness level. Definitely. We're all over. I mean, we're in the incubators, we're in the universities, there's demo days all the time. There's a brain bio thing happening in a week that's going to take 2 days, or CDL. There's all kinds of really interesting places to find these organizations, but it takes a lot of work. So that's the day job is finding these companies, getting the pitches, and doing the due diligence, and hopefully investing. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Colin, we try to kind of explain what deep tech is, and over the past couple of episodes, we kind of realized that deep tech means different things to different people. Can we maybe get a high level version of what you call deep tech?
Yeah, sure. So it's still undefined in general, I think, in the world, because people, can do what they want. The way we define it, I mean, I always just say it's a little bit more complicated technology. That's the made simple version. But we have the categories. We have like quantum, robotics, advanced materials, even med tech. There's like 7 categories that we kind of, clean tech is in there, and blockchain. Anything that it's usually tied to engineering and tied to kind of like IP or patents and things like that, or trade secrets. So there's usually something complicated about it, and what we found, because Canadian VC landscape is still early in its, in the evolution of the VC landscape ecosystem. A lot of the VC people in Canada come from a financial background, so they often don't get the nuances of the technology early enough. I mean, they get it once it's set in the market, and maybe they're doing a Series A. They kind of get the traction and the need for it, but they probably won't get it before there's traction, before there's commercialization. So we, as engineers, we like to sort of try to, and with our, not with just ourselves, but we have a little team of engineers that we work with to go deep into the technology, to try to understand the technology risk early on, to get involved early on. So that's kind of what we do. And that's kind of how we define it as well, as sort of technology risk involved. And we like to sort of see if we can understand that risk and try to invest early, and, help the company's transition.
So I want to take us a little back. So you talked about the wall. There was a gap in the market that you identified, and you tried to fill that with RiSC Capital. But I want to go a little deeper there to understand the gap a little better. So you were trained as an engineer. You worked as an engineer, as a product person. You had, as you said, your own entrepreneurial ventures, and a period of time that you worked in investment before starting RiSC Capital. So take us back there. Maybe a few concrete examples of things that you personally encountered that eventually convinced you that you need to have a fund like RiSC Capital.
Yeah. So I mean, as I was saying earlier, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I mean, even when I remember in university, I was, you know, we went to Mexico on March break, and me and my friend just bought like 200 pairs of shorts because they were so cheap down there. And it was a popular kind of shorts that people were wearing in those days. We brought them back and sold them on campus and paid for our whole trip. So we do stuff like that. And then I was really interested in pizza when I was living in England, and because they didn't have delivery pizza. So I was working on that when I was 18 or 19. And then, so I always knew, I knew really early on that I was going to start companies, and that was something that I really liked to do. So then I started getting jobs. Then I went to university. Then I started getting jobs in different companies, mainly to learn about the different aspects of running a company. So I worked in product management. I worked in finance. I worked in different aspects of companies in my career, so I could learn. So when I started a company, I would have a good feel for everything. And and then I started a nonprofit that's still going. I started that in 1995, called Reboot Canada, recycling computers from corporations to charities across Canada. Started e-commerce company back in the late 90s, doing online auctions. Then started fintech company and email archiving company. It was kind of I was a little bit all over the map with my startups. But what triggered is while I was running like these companies, your brain is completely focused on the company. Like, Chat GPT would come along, and I wouldn't even know what it was for, like, till it was like 2 years into it, because you're so focused on your company. There's all kinds of cool tech going by you, and I realized at a certain point that it takes. And also, I realized that it takes like 10 years to build a company. So I mean, you start from zero, and we hear in the news about the success stories of whatever that take like 3 or 4 years, and then they sell it for $100 million, and everyone's. So you hear about that in the news, but the reality is that, if you're just going on averages, it's going to be 10 years before you kind of sell the company, probably. And, I was looking at my age and how many more of these I could do. And, I wasn't going to stop at any time. I wasn't going to retire, but it's like I could do maybe 3 or 4 more companies like this. And I was like, I don't want to do 3 more companies. I want to do like 30 companies. Like I'm running out of time here. And so I had to change the model. So the model, rather than run one company at a time, I had to kind of transition into investing and helping companies. So the transition was, I would sign on to a company, and I would be kind of an investor, and helping get it off the ground, and then kind of transition out of that company. So it was kind of like early angel investing, or something like that. And that way I built a portfolio. So that was from like 2004 to 2018. I built a portfolio of about 25 companies, which that's what I was after. I was after kind of getting involved in a lot of different companies. And then really the next phase was, and I had a lot of confidence in what I was doing. I had a track record. I felt responsible enough to be able to go out to other investors and say, look, here's what I've done. let's let's raise a fund and put more money into it, because I wanted, I had a certain amount of money I could put into my angel investing or my personal VC investing, but it wasn't enough for that gap. There was a real opportunity, and there's a real need to fill the gap with more money than just my own personal money. So that was the transition into RiSC Capital, and that's why we launched RiSC Capital. And then it was really fortunate because at the time, my friend Scott Pelton, who I'd known for a while, was also looking for something. And his background is really synergistic with mine. He comes at it from top-down institutional VC background, and I come at more from an operations side. So that together, we, I think we can see a lot of different sides of the companies that we're looking at.
Definitely. So it sounds like you've been on this journey of creating impact in the world, either through businesses you started, products you built, companies you joined, later through angel investing, and the next natural stage of this scaling your impact is providing capital to companies. But if the gap that you're interested in is that translation gap between an idea to a product, and especially when it gets to deep tech kind of ideas like the examples that you gave, that gap is probably even bigger. So when you were thinking about what to do next in terms of scaling up your impact, did you consider any other models than venture capital? Like, for example, venture studio comes to mind, an accelerator comes to mind, incubator comes to mind, etc., etc. So why specifically a very early stage VC, even like compared to a later stage kind of VC?
So I can answer the early stage versus later stage. I just really like spending time with the younger, earlier stage startup people, because I can add value there because I've done it myself. So I can see, quickly, if the person in charge is missing some basic things, like maybe they're not really have a good feel for the accounting side or the bookkeeping side, or they don't have a feel for how to handle lawyers, for example, and so there's lots of little things, and it's not rocket science. It's just sometimes I can add value there. When at later stage I can add less value. I haven't really done a ton in scaling companies. And plus, I don't find it as exciting. I feel like once you get to a point where you've got you can build your projections and you kind of know what's going to happen next year because you've got everything in place, and you just want to, add fuel to the fire there through some kind of scaling, cleverness or more capital or whatever. That's not so interesting. For me, that's an engine, and you just bring on the right people, and it's hard to do, but it's kind of like, okay, so we've got everything sorted out. It's just a matter of, at that point, it's a matter of not making any mistakes. In the early stage, it's more about, there's intuitive things, there's a lot of magic, there's hiring the right person, there's all kinds of little things, little nuanced things that you can try to get right. And on the other hand, there are a lot of variables that can take the company out also very quickly too. So that's why you got to build a large portfolio of lots of companies, because you need the diversification there. But I just like the early stage. And then why didn't I choose any other scenario? I kind of grew up only really knowing this scenario, and so it's sort of in my blood. My father was venture capital as well, so it's something that I've been familiar with my entire life, and it's kind of what I know the most. And so I didn't consider the other options. I don't know, because it didn't really occur to me, actually.
Cool, Colin. So I was wondering if historically there were different versions of RiSC Capital that you envisioned. Was there like a version 1.0 that you had in mind, and then once you actually built it and started it with Scott, it basically had other iterations and other versions because of the things that you saw in the ecosystem, or it has always been the RiSC Capital that we see today?
Yeah, no, it's always been the same. When we first got together, though, we were out. We were putting our mission together in our deck and trying to go out and raise money. Of course, first time fund takes a long time to raise some money. So what we ended up doing, a really fortunate stroke of luck came our way, which was this. There's this. I think Canada's biggest media company is called Cossette. I think they have, they have maybe 1,000 employees or something like that. I'm not sure, but giant office in Toronto, Montreal, across Canada. And they were doing something on the NASDAQ. They were merging with an Asian marketing company. So they were doing a ton of things, including starting a venture studio. So they internally wanted to, incubate young marketing tech startups, and help them, and also, make some money off of those guys as well, because they wanted to incubate them, invest in them, and then, have the exits. And they hired Scott and I while we were trying to raise our RiSC Capital fund. They hired us to help them with their venture fund, Venture Lab. And so we were very fortunate to have a great, I think, 12 months with those guys while we were out raising our money for RiSC Capital. So we were entirely focused on marketing tech companies for the first year of our career. And then another stroke of luck happened, which was COVID arrived. Marketing companies are very sensitive to things like COVID, and because, they had immediately started cutting staff, like 20% of their staff got cut right away because there was going to be sort of a downturn in the market. A lot less, hospitality, anything outdoors. I mean, it was all going to change from the marketing perspective. And so they decided to stop running this venture fund. They're doing so many things at the time. That was one of the things, was they decided to stop the venture fund. And that was right when we decided it was time to actually close in on some money that we were getting traction with. So what ended up happening was, just as we were finishing the cassette fund, we were able to close money on our fund. So it kept the light. We had money coming in to keep the lights on through that period. So there was a serious transition in the middle, but we were always entirely focused on what we're doing now, which is the deep tech RiSC fund.
Awesome. So I guess coming to the present time RiSC Capital, this is obviously some of the things that we discuss in every episode. Some of the viewers are going to be the entrepreneurs focused on deep tech companies. And the biggest question in their head is that we have started the company. Now, how do we come to RiSC Capital to fund our company? What would be your answer to that?
You just go on our website and fill out the form. We get a couple of those we get probably maybe one a day on average, I guess, people filling out the form. Most of them, fill out the form that aren't quite clear on what the deep tech is, or that we're focused right now in the moment in Canada. So, a lot of them, don't make it through. We just give them, a quick response. But if they hit our sweet spot, which is what we consider deep tech, we try to explain that, I think, on the website, and they're based in Canada and they're at a certain stage that we like, then, we start having the call. And it usually starts off with a one partner call, leads into two partner call with if it's in an area of tech that we need to bring in one of our advisors, we bring in one of our advisors to help. And then we start due diligence. But really, it's just a matter of, I'm sure my email's on the website, or you can, call in at RiSC.capital, just contact. I mean, we're listening to whatever's coming in.
Very cool. So for those who are less familiar with you, one of the advantages that I personally get from, being connected with you on social media is that, you post a lot of educational content. Usually it has this structure that this is how deep tech founders think, but they should be thinking this other way. And, I've definitely experienced that over, the past 4 years that that I've been working on aggregate intellect, that, coming from academia and then, a short period in corporate life, I had to relearn a lot of the ways I thought about things. Mm-hmm. And, again, like as a scientist, I always thought I was very good at experimental design, because, that's literally what I did for years. But one of your LinkedIn posts was, exactly talking about that there's a shift in how you think about inventing future when you go forward. And, in order, we were just talking about people coming to you, but in order to prepare properly for a business and set yourself up for success when you're talking to VCs, a lot of the time what they want to see is what customer focused experiments have you done and what did you learn from them. So talk to us a little about that. How is that mindset different, because you work with a lot of scientists? What's the transition that is necessary to happen, and assuming that you do the experiments right, what are the right ways to tell the story of the experiments and the learnings that you've seen effectively?
Every company is at a different stage. So if we talk about deep tech, it starts off as a science experiment, right? So and they're proving a hypothesis, they're testing it, they're doing research, and so it's a full journey. We don't really want to invest at that stage, at that. I'll hear the story. Anybody that wants to tell me about what they're working on, I'm happy to hear, because I'm super fascinated by all that all the time. But specifically for venture capital investing, we like to wait. Just our firm, it's not a general. I don't know if it's generalized, but we like to wait until the product is pretty much done, at least an MVP or something, and then it's put in the hands of a potential customer. And it could be just the customer has agreed to prototype it. They have to show, not only that they have a product that a customer can actually use and ultimately buy, but they have to show also that they can actually find a customer. Like, they have to, get out of the lab and go and knock on the door and be able to convince a customer that they should try this out. And so those two things become kind of like the minimum for us. Generalizing, but generally that's the minimum for us. And so we wait for that little moment, and if they don't contact during that moment, then the company hopefully keeps progressing, and then they get some sales, and then they've got traction, and then and we find that they'll contact us at that time, which is fine too. And then eventually they have started. Hopefully if they're successful, they have a lot of sales, and then all of a sudden they become out of our sweet spot, because then they're valued at a high value that is too high for us. We don't like to invest in companies too far along, because we feel there's more money for those companies in Canada. We don't need to be competing in that area. We have our little niche area, and so that's what it is. And that's something that entrepreneurs have to be clear on, because they don't really even know, they often don't know how companies progress and how to, make companies progress and things like that. So they don't know where the direction is. So they have to figure that out. And and in my LinkedIn post, I've tried to explain that, it's not interesting to come to us and say, here's a great thing, you guys should invest. It's like, no, here's a great thing, and how is it going to become something even greater, and how is it going to make money, and how is it going to work out for everyone, so that there's a return on investment. You can come out with a product that is competitive you take any market, you can come out with a product that will break even, and you will be selling for less than everybody else out there, and you will beat everyone else up, and your product will sell you'll sell gazillions of products because you're cheaper than all the competition. But if it costs you the same amount of money to sell it, and there's no profits in the future, well, that's not interesting, right? So you have to understand the business side as well, and that's something where we come in, or we can help, or hopefully I'm trying to answer your question about what do they need to be prepared for? They need to be prepared to come in and say, there's a real business case here. Like, we understand there's a technical case, hopefully, but we have to understand there's a real business case here too. And that's something it seems to elude a lot of people.
And I guess jumping on the same wagon of deep tech founders, I think I myself, like Amir, come from that academic background. They obviously don't teach us how to pitch ourselves or our ideas. They tell us how to create maybe experiments, how to write publications, how to present the research ideas. So there is no frame of mind in terms of commercialization. Initially, they don't teach us, obviously, how to think about profit unless we are curious enough, or unless we try to like go through that route ourselves. There's basically no means for us to really see beyond the cool technology. And so I personally basically stopped that academic route, started studying more on the business side. I started like finding jobs on the business side and educated myself more. And I can attest to the fact that these deep tech founders, they might not have the business acumen, but they're smart enough to learn that. But yeah, maybe I would flip it back to you. What do you think we should do to attract more scientists and deep tech founders to be investment ready for us? Is it something that we can do? Is it something that the educational system should do? Where do you think the gap is? This is more of a policy question, but I just want to know your insight.
Yeah, I was reading some of the feedback on the post that I did a few days ago, and there was one woman, I can't remember her name. She said, it should really be in the educational system, and that kind of I that resonated with me. Like, when you're if you're doing your PhD, that means you've done the undergrad, you've done maybe a master's and a PhD. There's time in there. There's time in that journey to take a little bit of learning around the business side or commercialization, and if that's something that you're interested in. So assuming that you're interested in it, there should be, I think there should be education around that, or incubator education or something. Like I think some of these organizations do a pretty good job. CDL gives you a mentor to sort of take you through that a little bit. The hatchery gives mentors. And the other ones give programming. Centec in Montreal does some nice programming. Tandem Launch, also education. So there is a sort of an education around that, but you got to search for it, and it's not normal. You got to be very proactive with that type of education. But I think that's where it starts. And it's not that difficult. I mean, it's not that difficult. It's if you can, learn the tech and understand all that, you've obviously got the chops to learn the business side as well. Like it's the business side is a little easier than the tech side typically, I think.
Right. No, that perfectly makes sense. So I guess, again, present time RiSC Capital, you have had a bunch of investments now going into a couple of deep tech companies. I was wondering, maybe you could walk us through one of these investments that you would like to share with us. What did you see in the company? What did you see in the founders? What KPIs kind of caught your eyes so that you ultimately decided to invest? You may name the company or not, however you're comfortable with.
Sure. I mean, we have a bunch. I mean, we have a drone robotics company. We have an AI medical records company. We have a med tech company that are all doing pretty well right now. I think the harder ones are the ones where we have to kind of get more involved. And the easy ones are the ones where the team just sort of comes together really quickly, and we don't have to help them very much. So we look at something called the 4 T's. We got team, tech, traction, and timing. Those are kind of like what we're looking at. And to be successful in business, you usually have to have those 4 ingredients. And the science background entrepreneurs really usually focus on the tech, and everything else is kind of like secondary. And we kind of try to level the playing field with all those 4 things. So we kind of walk everyone through that. But so to answer your question, I think one of our earlier investments was something called Semantic Health. And they were doing natural language processing on medical records. And there was something out there, a health database that someone did some, easy NLP on to sort of extract out stuff. But these guys specialized in that, which is really useful. And what they saw, the problem that they solved was in hospitals, you have teams of humans going through healthcare records on a regular basis. in order to turn those healthcare records into billable codes. And in Canada, it's for the government, because the government pays for the healthcare, and in the US, it's for the insurance companies. So you would think the normal solution would be these enormous healthcare software platforms that get sold to hospitals. One's called Cerner, and the other one's called Epic. You would think that they would say, okay, if a doctor does a diabetes diagnosis, he could do a pull down window, say what test he did, and then that would translate into a billable code. Well, those companies had this theory that the doctors would do this properly. And it turns out that they never do. They don't care. Like, they're like, it's not my problem. I did a diabetes test. I'm on to the next thing. I don't have time to figure out which test I did and what code it's like. That's not my problem. So I'm going to write diabetes test. You guys figure out the rest. Even though, that it should be solved that way, right? That's an engineering way of thinking. So as a result of that, they have to have a team of humans at every hospital to go through these things, try to look through the diagnosis, look through the record of all the information, and try to figure out what diabetes test it was. And they can figure it out because they can learn that. So humans can do it, but specialized NLP can do it even better. And so it was a great use case of the AI that we've been seeing developing over the last 10, 15 years. So the tech was really interesting. It worked. We had sick kids and another hospital telling us it worked. We had the other hospital in Toronto wanting to invest in the company. So we had that kind of, and it was all proof of concept at this level. And then we had the team that did. So Nicola was he was a Harvard business school guy who went to med school afterwards. He hired a very strong NLP team. We kept going and saying, "Hey, do you need any help?" And they're like, "No, we don't need any help." Okay, I mean that's a good sign. I mean, we sort of we asked a lot of questions. They gave us the right answers. So it was one of our easiest and best investments so far. And that did a 4 or 5x within 12 months. The round after we invested in was 4 to 5 times the valuation, I think, either within 12 months or at least within probably 14 months or something like that. So those guys, they were also very savvy to know that last year there was a great window to invest. The market was very frothy, and they knew enough to raise an extra money earlier than they needed, but they knew it was the right time. So that was a good skill set as well. A lot of entrepreneurs we saw missed that window, and they spent the first 6 months of 2022 saying, here, we want this valuation from last fall. And they weren't quite aware that the valuations had dropped and the market had changed because they're focused on building their science company. They don't understand the market dynamics. And we were, sorry, those valuations that were happening with your friends' companies and whatever, those are gone. And, it took them more than 6 months to figure that out. So there were very few deals done in the first 6-8 months of 2022 as a result of the shift in the market that happened. But yeah, that's one of our companies.
Awesome. So one of the things that you emphasized as, why you were working in the specific stage of companies that you do, like very early stage, is the fact that, it's a little personal for you. Like, you want to be able to help the company beyond just the capital. Like, you want to be able to help shape the idea, especially on the business side, because, a lot of founders you deal with, are coming from the technical background. So they have to learn the business side. They have to do an MBA on the fly as they're building their business, right? So, and that's something that, again, as a new founder, as a first-time founder, it took me a while to understand that, that's an important component for a lot of early-stage investors. So what are, as a founder coming to you, to pitch to you, to, start a relationship with you, obviously this is going to be a long-term relationship as well. So what are the ways that I should expect to get help beyond capital from an early stage investor like you? And what's the right way to show, my willingness to have that kind of partnership that goes just beyond capital? Like, how do you vet for founders who are, I don't know if coachable is the right word, these founders who are more, I don't just want your money, I want this partnership to build this thing together.
Yeah, I mean, I think as much as we like to make money, we also like to have a nice life, right? And so when I'm looking at startups, I have to have a nice feel with the entrepreneur. Like, I have to have, that sense of like, yes, I would like to go and have a few beers with you at the end of the day, and talk about other things. Like, that's an important part. And so we definitely look for that. We look for, the way we do that is we kind of look for red flags. We some people we talk to have that arrogance. They think they know everything, and so those people are going to be hard to work with. You try to listen for trust issues. So some people, they say something and you kind of maybe double check and you realize it's not exactly true what they said. So that raises a little red flag on trust. Trust is so important because, without trust, you have to always, pay for everything in a way. Like, there's so many, you can, at a startup stage where its resources are so limited and time is so important, if you can't trust the person and you have to, you can't shake your hand on and agree on something and then believe that that's going to actually happen, which you shouldn't be doing normally, because good paper makes a good relationship. But you have to be able to do that. So there's sort of these soft characteristics of individuals which you have to try to figure out by doing your own due diligence on the person, but also spending time with the person and getting to know them and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen ideas which I think are great business ideas, and I've had this conversation with my partner. We kind of go, yeah, I mean, this company is going to do well, and from a financial point of view, we should probably invest, but there's something, we just don't like the person, or the person's not coachable, as you're saying, or the ego gets in the way, or they're got a hidden agenda, or they're motivated by different things that what we are motivated by. So we kind of try to pick up on that, and then we don't necessarily want to work with those kind of people, because you want to have a nice team, and you want to make it not much animosity, and you don't have to end up in lawsuits and things like that. Like, that's just time consuming and no fun.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Colin, for that. And I kind of wanted to ask you a question about the red flags. I know there is that. That's going to be probably a longer answer, maybe another meeting that we can cover all the red flags that we see with companies. But maybe as sort of a last question, I wanted to ask you about the future that you see for deep tech investments or deep tech companies in specifically in Canada. What do you think the future holds? Where do you think the disruption will happen, and how do you think do you think the ecosystem of investment would change?
Future of deep tech. So my goal is to kind of grow the deep tech ecosystem in Canada. It's huge. It's huge in Europe. It's actually bigger in Europe than it is in the States. Like, there are tons of deep tech funds in Europe looking for cool technologies coming out of universities and labs and things like that. There's a bunch of funds. I mean, there's a lot of countries in Europe too. So there's a lot of, different ways of looking at it and each country has their own set of deep tech funds. And the US, less so, but still more than Canada. And so I kind of feel like the future of deep tech in Canada is sort of on the trajectory of the US and Europe, where over time, as we have more successful entrepreneurs in deep tech, those guys put money back into the deep tech industry. That's where a lot of the growth will come from, I think. That we'll be able to grow it into an important, I think a few $100 million in early stage deep tech would be great for the country, because then you could go all across Canada, all the universities, fund all the innovation that's coming out. Like there's definitely innovation coming out of Canada that looks pretty good. I mean, we don't have to take the risk on, innovation coming out of Canada that is more risky. Like, we get kind of the pick of the litter at the size of our fund. So, but we see other deals, which if there was more money in the ecosystem, we would be investing in. So, there's lots of deals that are not getting funding. And what ends up happening is unfortunately, the US comes in, and the US 15 years ago, hardly came to Canada and would never go early stage, would never go, seed stage. It was just like, they would always say, I mean, back when I was an entrepreneur, like I'd call up an American VC firm. They'd say, yeah, come down to my office in California or in Boston. And we're not going up there. And then even if you go down there, they kind of say, okay, we might invest in you, but you got to move to this city first because we're not going up there. But now, because, there's this gap, the Americans are up here. So there are, DCVC, big US deep tech firm. I think they did in the last 12 months, they've probably done 12 deals in Canada. And that's just, that's not a lot compared to some of the other ones. And so my goal is to grow the size of deep tech in Canada, put more Canadian money into deep tech, and less foreign money into deep tech, and just try to make sure that the university innovators have the ability to commercialize in Canada, because it's no fun spending 5 years on some tech and ultimately it's something that's going to be world changing and you can't get it out the door. Like that's just that's disheartening for the entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess that's what every time we talk to someone, we come down to that there's this need for more capital and more focus on deep tech Canadian companies. There's obviously a lot of support from the government on research side. There's a lot of world-class research happening in Canadian universities. And it's not just Canadian universities. There are like a lot of professionals in different fields working and then coming out with innovation to fill up the gaps in their specific fields based on the know-how that they have developed over the years. And it would obviously be more meaningful for the country to keep this innovation here, help it grow here, and then export the fruit outside and basically make more money for the Canadians.
Yeah. What's the point? Like, what's the point of? I mean, Canada does a pretty good job, I think, of supporting innovation at the science project level. Pre-commercialization, and they're very good at that. So it's great. So all this money goes into that. But what's the point if you can't get it to the next stage? And so, not that the government should be funding that. I don't agree with that. But somebody should be. I mean, somebody that can make a buck off of it or whatever should be. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, Colin, there's probably a lot of questions that we didn't even get to. This is definitely a topic near and dear to our hearts and yours. So I'm sure those who also watch this episode will have a ton of questions, who can reach out to you through your email and LinkedIn as well. But it was great to have you with us. Looking forward to more collaboration and work together in the near future. And I guess to our viewers, I would like to thank you for joining us today. And please stay in touch and look forward for future episodes.
All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot.